This is Making Light. Julie Hurt and Kate Foggo are soul-level intuitives and animal communicators. This show is about us sharing our experiences in the hope it will help others along their path. So let's go make some light. Hello everybody, I'm Kate Foggo, this is Julie Hurt, and together we are making light to humans being. We're being a bit frivolous actually, because we're both having issues with reflection, and Julie's worried about being shiny, and I was doing fine, and then as soon as she sorted herself out, anyway, we can't do anything about it. And as Julie says, it just means we've got angel shit going on. And just as she said that, a dust mote went right across her screen. So thank you, angels. So if you see any odd glare, it's just that the angels are, I don't know what, shining on us.
Angels are sprinkling all the wonderful dust and all the good things.
So before we go here, here's a concept. Before we go into this, who is I talking to? Do you believe in fairies?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I'm just not sure. As in, yeah, I don't know. And then so I was talking about this when we were out with my swim buddies who aren't necessarily of the same persuasion as me. And
you mean woo-woo aren't necessarily woo-woo?
Yes, exactly, precisely. So there is potential for ridicule here. That's fine. It's only, I don't mind. But someone said something about someone had come to Scotland that she'd met somebody on a train or something, and he was coming to Scotland. So and he was a professor of something, like a university something or other, and he was coming to Scotland to study fairies. And she's like, what? And I was like, and then someone said, well, Kate probably believes in fairies. Do you believe in fairies? And I was like, do you know what? I don't know. Like, I know people that do. I don't really know. Do I believe in wood nymphs? And that? I don't know. But, I believe in even angels. That's not what I see in my head. But I believe that I can talk to dead animals. Who am I to say there are no fairies? Where do you draw the line? It's like, so I'm sort of like, I would have to, take the fifth on this, because I don't know. I don't. Yeah. I guess it depends what a fairy is. This is another conversation though, but what do you think?
Yes.
A fairy is? No, okay, we'll not go there. Right, if you
Yeah,
want to
we won't go there.
Write in and ask that we talk about fairies. Okay, in the meantime, we are on
week 3.
Overwork. Week 3. Overwork in the context of not good enough. And as I sat in the car, my sister's with me at the moment, and we're driving back from my mum, actually seeing my mum. And I thought, I was sort of talking out loud, because I was like, oh, do you plan what you talk about? And I thought, well, we've started to, but let me think this through. And then, of course, as you pointed out, our mothers, whether in the form of dementia and probably all our lives before that, have very much driven us to overwork through not good enough. Julie, discuss.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, you were telling me about going to visit your mom, and I'll let you tell her story. But it reminded me, which is why we're talking about this today, about my mom she has mild cognitive impairment. So it's the beginning stages of all of it, but you can see some of the symptoms, right? The same conversation repeats every 15 minutes. Sometimes she gets agitated pretty quickly when things are not controlled, in her controlled. Now there's a lot of different things that are going on, and it triggers us. We were talking earlier how it triggers us feeling not good enough. For my mom, it's, I moved back from Alaska to here to help take care and figure out what was going on. And then even just trying to get the tests that are needed to get the diagnosis. And it's just this overwork of like constantly putting ourselves out there. There is this tornness between, for me personally, I'm also the oldest child. So there's this tornness between, it's my duty to take care of them, my mom and dad, but I also have all this other stuff that I want to do. But then, and time is not, we don't have a lot of time, and it's all, and just going back and forth.
And no discussion would be complete without mention of patriarchy. But why do you think you feel like that? Like, why? How many sons do you think go,
Yeah. Yeah.
I better move my entire family across the whole of the United States out of a place I love because I want to be close to them so they can reject me more. No, where first time I had that proper counselling, it was on the phone, which I found very well. So that wasn't the first time. Sorry, one of many times I had counselling. One of the and it was about my mum, and I was just like, it was before she even moved back from Turkey, but she had just done, I don't know, she managed to be demanding even in absentia. I would spend hours on emails telling her how to reboot her laptop because this was happening or that was happening. I would talk about overwork. Fuck it. Oh fuck. Oh my God, Julia, I spent hours. She'd just write some random, I don't understand why your computer's doing blah. And I would research it and find out why, and I would write out all the steps for her. I would spend hours on these emails, only to find it was a complete non-issue by the time she got the email. It'd be like, oh, that, and you'd be like, oh, I spent days writing that email and then recrafting it in words of one syllable because you're an idiot and you don't even need it. And oh my God, that's so much overwork. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so but the counsellor said to me, because I was just like, I don't know what to do, I think I have to leave the country. And she's like, why? And I said, because I can't say. She was back on holiday, she's come back just to be even more charming in person. And I was like, because I can't say no to her and she's just too demanding. And she's like, why can't you say no to her? And I was like, because I can't. I remember getting really angry with her actually. I was like, because she's like, well, you don't have to. And I was like, but you don't understand. Anyway, she said that like most people, not most, but there was some huge statistic of people that emigrate is to escape their families because it's easier to not be able to help than to apply boundaries. If if you live in Australia, so the people that go really long haul are often children escaping their family or their parents in some way. That's tough, isn't it? You have to go, because honestly, I was like, I see no other solution other than for me to move to Australia. I could not see a way out.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't do moving away consciously. Like I didn't think about I need to get away. And I don't know if and this is actually something I've been thinking about for quite some time, like years. What is it that made me want to, like I went away to college and I would rarely come home. I couldn't wait to get out of the town I lived in, and which is 30 minutes now from me. Anyway, but I couldn't wait to and go to college and rarely come home. And then I moved to Germany and I lived there for 2.5 years. And then I moved back and I was close. And then I started moving further and further afield, like back out to Alaska. And I never felt like it was driven by the need to be separate from them. There is something about wanting to see other places, live in other cultures, to get a taste of something else. And I don't know if it's actually driven by them. However, it did make it easier to not get pulled in. I mean, now that I look at, oh, well, it's actually pretty good. And, I couldn't get pulled into the drama of whatever was going on with my family. I couldn't, and at the same time, I could be, actually, now that I think about it too, to my extended family, there's something of like an exotic, oh, look where she's going, look where she's going. I actually talked to my sister when I moved back here to West Michigan. And I said, I didn't want to have to leave you with, this is also overworking. I didn't want to have to leave her with everything that was going on with my dad. Because by the time we moved home, my dad had had a stroke and all this stuff. And I didn't want to leave her. And so there's an overwork thing right there too. And I said, so I moved back and she's like, well, I always admired you for being the adventurous one and trying to go see other stuff. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it. That's what I thought so too. Yeah. So it's,
and
yeah.
actually, that's a really nice way, because she could have said, which some sisters might have done, well, it's all right for you, you fucked off to somewhere else, because you get a lot of that. Well, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. I do think that fear lies with her, though, that I will just go because we do want to go. And I've already told her, I'm not staying here. Like, this is not the long-term, at least that I want, the long-term plan that I want. But yeah, that makes her nervous, which I understand. So
it does, but the thing is, you can't draw boundaries for her either.
No.
You know, the more time I spend in homes and things like that, the more I realise that actually, I think staff have said that to me as well, one way or the other. You realise that you think you're the most important thing in your when your parents go into care. I still think it's not that I actively think my mum sits around dying for me to go and see her, because she's not like that, and B, she can't remember either way. But you know, there is an element of that duty, and you realize that you're actually only a really small part, because they're actually with other people all the time. So they may get all, oh, why don't you come and see me more often? You know, I would get that from my mum, not now, but you know, when she was more cognizant of what was going on, you could never see enough of her. It would never be enough for her. You know, she's like those old ladies that open the door and say, oh, nice of you to show up. You know, that would just be her default response to anything. You could never give enough. I think there's a song by, oh, I'll have to look it up. It's Huberstank, who I love. Like,
Oh,
Gary calls them the God Squad, because one of their songs is, I don't think they are a God Squad at all. But it's
yeah.
the more I fill your cup, the less basically the more I do for you, the less pleased you are, the less I can do, the less, you know. And it's a song that when it comes on, it's one of those songs that just makes me want to cry if I sing it, because I guess it's really poignant, and it's actually a really good recognition, and that's a really good thing for overwork as well. When you actually get to the point where you realize you can never work hard enough, because
Yeah.
you know, what you're doing isn't filling anybody's cup. There are people that get some, well, my mom is one of those people that got a lot of, I wouldn't say joy, but satisfaction of putting me to work, you know, as if it was you know, maybe that's her emotional immaturity, in that, let me see if I can get Kate to do that. As long as Kate's doing this for me, then it means that she cares about me. Because, you know, that became more and more obvious before she went completely gaga. That became more and more obvious. Like, if I was about to go home, she would find all these tasks for me, or get in a fuss, or start, you know, bringing out random things from the house that required my attention, and like, she would not let me leave, and it was like she was just sort of goading me to stay longer and longer and longer.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
it's the whole catalogue of overwork.
Oh yeah. As you were talking, it just reminded me too of when we even when, okay, so my dad had a stroke in 2019 and we still lived in Alaska. So then, and then COVID hit and I couldn't get back enough to see them, because I thought, well, instead of coming back annually, I'll come back quarterly. Couldn't, in the first quarterly plan, shot out the window because that's when COVID hit. And then I remember like trying to ask questions from afar, and no one wanted to talk about what, you know, what they needed, or what they didn't want to share any of that with me. And I hadn't yet learned the lesson of it's their life. And I still have a hard time with it, right? Because I can see things that are changing in both parents, and I'm like, oh, let me swoop in and help. No, they don't want that. So now we're at the point where so when I lived in Alaska, every Sunday we would FaceTime. So, and so we're kind of, to some degree, back on that schedule, even though I'm, you know, a 30-minute drive from them. Still, once a week I call them, and usually every other week I will see them, but it's for a meal or a cup of coffee or something like that. It's not some big overblown thing. They don't want to talk about, you know, how you doing? Great. Anything I can do for you? No. You know, I do know where certain documents are. I know where certain things are. I know the triggers to, you know, that whatever. And a friend of mine had me read Being Mortal, which I'll put it's a book written by a doctor about the end of life and how we need to have these conversations. And there are some conversations I probably have to have with them yet. However, they don't want me swooping in.
You don't know how lucky you are, Julie. I know it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah,
But, you know,
I know.
the other end of that is people who demand attention of you absolutely constantly. The only thing I would say to you is get a power of attorney. Other than that, just wait until they need it.
I've
Because
got it all. Yeah.
if you've got power of attorney, fucking leave them to it. Honestly, because
Yeah.
you can't help them. They don't want your help.
No, even though I can see that there's there's a couple medical things we should probably be addressing, they don't want it. So, and in that book, Being Mortal, the guy, yeah, he talks about if they don't want it, don't let them. Our medicine focuses so much on fixing
Yes.
instead of honoring the transition of life and the phases of life.
I
It
would
would be a much better outcome if we did the latter instead of trying to fix it.
I think so what we haven't talked about, and this is exactly it. So we're complaining about the net result of overwork, but the reason is why. That's what we're here to talk about. Why do we do it? Why do you need to fix that for your parents? Why do you feel that you have to swoop in and do everything? Because this has been an eye-opener, and I know we've talked about it in both unlovable and unworthy. Not good enough for me is more about like being the perfectionist and being this and being that. But yeah, why do you have to be the good daughter? Why do you have to be the perfectionist? That why isn't your attention ever enough? So I suppose that's for me the slight difference, and they do all munge up in not good enough. It's more about, well, I'm not like doing too much of something, or keeping working away at something because it needs to be better, because I need to be, but also this thing, like today we had the conversation with the nurse. My mum was horrible to me today, so we better not go there, because I'm just going to end up mother bashing, because actually for the first, I don't know if it's because my sister's here, but she was actually a real cow to me, and I thought, oh, you're still in there, aren't you, nasty little bitch? And I was like, really, and the nurses were really taken aback, because they think we actually had a conversation with the nurse, and they go, your mum's absolutely adorable, she's all cuddly and that. And I was like, she's fucking making up for lost time. No, I didn't say fucking, because she hadn't made me angry by then. But the first thing she said to Stan was, oh, it's lovely to see you. And then she looked at me and she said, I'm not sure about you. And you're like, oh, okay. And then she said, well, you look nice. And then she said, well, you don't, because you don't very often, do you? Also, you're like, this is a woman that can fucking barely string a sentence together, but she can certainly say, and it's not that she doesn't know what she's saying. She knows exactly what she's saying. And anyway, so she kept this up. So I don't know if it's that having my sister there brings out some sort of performance in her, some sort of, since she has an audience, this nasty bit of her comes back, because she was really quite horrible. And I actually sat there and anyway, she's got issues. Well, she's got lots of issues, but she's been on a catheter to try and clear up basically a rash she's got because she's incontinent, without getting too personal. But wait till your parents get older, nothing is off limits. Anyway, she's ripped the catheter out, which doesn't surprise me because she's a busybody and anyway, but they think she's allergic to pads. Of course she is. She's the only woman in the world that's allergic to. Anyway, sorry, I'm quite irritated. So I'm sitting Googling natural, reusable. I had a conversation with them. Yes, they have a laundry, and yes, they'd use them if I could get them. Because I said, well, why don't we try cotton pads? And they're obviously hoping to get the catheter in, but she's made a lot of progress, and it'd be nice to have these things. Anyway, so, and I'm Googling, what's that? That's overwork. That's like, here, you've given me something to do. And now I feel okay, because now I'm the good daughter. I'm the good daughter because I'm Googling and I'm going to find the right solution for you. And even though she's completely oblivious to this, she couldn't give a shit. She's sitting there being nasty to me while I'm Googling her incontinence products. But it soothes me. And this is something new. This is what we're talking about. Eva Baronius and Julie and I are doing a workshop with Eva Baronius. We've been listening to her podcast, which I highly recommend, actually, and I'll put it in the links. I've mentioned her a few times, but she was the one that brought up overwork as a what do you call it?
Workaround. Well, she calls it negative belief, or not negative belief. She calls it a
response. Sorry, stress response. Yeah,
stress response. Yeah,
and it's true, because like I'm like, okay, now I'm shutting out you and your nastiness, and well, it wasn't, because the two weren't necessarily happening at the same time, but I am now, you've given me a task to do, and this is actually, looking back historically, the best way I could deal with my mother. So I encouraged this, because when I was alone with her, trying, spending time with her, doing stuff for her gave me a focus that meant I wouldn't kill her, because I had to. So I would literally go and see my mom and do chores from start to finish, and then I would feel like, right, well, I've done all the stuff that he's doing. I've changed her plugs, I've organized, I've tried to get her to feed the dog, I had, done all the spreadsheets, told her where everything is, organized all her stuff, done all this, as much as will physically possible to cram into a night before going home. And then I would feel, so that was actually all about me knowing that I had been good enough, that I had been a good daughter, and I had taken care of her. And that's the pattern that has persisted. So I was sitting there while Stella was talking to her on my phone, looking up incontinence pads, feeling my worthiness and my good enoughness, because I was doing something for her. Not that
yeah. So for me, when you were asking the question why, the guides show up over here on my right hand side, and I'm like, why do I overwork in an effort to work through not good enough? And they immediately go, well, a good girl always gets permission before she does anything. So for me, when I would do more, like go above and beyond or step in. I remember my mom used to own some clothing stores in the town that I'm from, and right downtown on the main drag. And they would have sidewalk sale every year in July, and it would be 2 full days. And I would take time off from my job. This was through high school on. I would take time off from my job. When I moved away, I would come home at that time, like all these different things. And I would work. And this is in the sun, it's in the heat. You don't eat a whole lot. You don't, it's 9 to 9 on one day and 9 to 5 or something on the next day. So that was one thing. And I would always when she would come over, I always would make sure that the house was spotless. And her mother did that to her too. So I picked that up going down. But I did this work. I did this overwork and all this, see, Mom, look at all the great things I do, so that I had permission to then go out of the house and do what I wanted to do. And I also, to some degree, kept it away from her. She calls me a very private person, and I don't share a whole lot with her, because why would I? Whenever I shared anything that I like, I would get a side eye or, head tilt, or what are you doing? And I even remember once when I was moving,
Isn't she cute, little weirdo?
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because that just reminds me that there were two things. There was the original story I was going to tell, but you just reminded me. When I was at college, the African-American students did a sit-in because of unfair inequality, all of the things, right? So they did a sit-in, and it because they sat in at the administration building, it was close to graduation, and it was hard for other people to get in to get the documents that they needed to graduate. And I supported the African-American students. And my mom, I remember I was home from school for a weekend or something, and I said to her, or she was watching the news, and she turned around, the TV was behind her, and I'm over here, she turns around, she looks at me, she goes, "You support them, don't you?" And I said, "Well, yeah. Why wouldn't I?" She goes, "I don't know where you come from." That little thing right there, just boom, right at, and so I've always had that too, playing like I'm the oddball. And so some degree, I probably do overwork to be the oddball. But I can't help the fact that I'm drawn to animal communication. I'm drawn to spirituality, the woo-woo stuff.
No,
and then every time I do it, it's like, yeah.
Whatever you did, they would find a way to. It wouldn't matter what you. No, I've learned that much, because my sister's, she's a bit on the woo-woo side now, but when I was off doing bad things, my sister was a very good student, and I'm sort of talking teenage, early, university age, just anyway, that sort of age. In my view, at least, I thought my sister had done the right things, and she, and she got, the same in a different context. But there was, why didn't you go to university? Why didn't you do that? And it's like it's a learning process where you just have to accept that you're never going to get it right. You can't do enough. You can't be good enough.
No.
You can't do the right thing. You can't. But the odd thing is, and I don't know if you and your sister talk about this, his mum couldn't wait to tell me how great Stella was, and Stella says the same about me. Never said it to me. I was like, I didn't know this. It's actually. But she couldn't wait to tell me about all the great things that Stella had done that I hadn't achieved. And yet Stella's like gobsmacked when I tell her that. She's like, God, she never stopped going on about you. And it's like, why? Yeah. But that rather than my mum just being a psycho, I think that's a lot of generational stuff, isn't it? He didn't want you to get a big head. Like, God forbid you were nice to somebody. It's like,
yeah. Just before I went to Alaska the last time, to answer, my mom, we had dinner with my parents, and as I was leaving, my mom, as she hugged me, just said how proud she was of me, which she has said before, but it's been a long time since I've really heard it. And I was like, oh, I hope that's you and not the
and not don't say any more, Mom. Just don't say any more, because you're going to spoil it.
Yeah. But my sister and I have talked about it because I believe she is my mother's favorite, is that I am my father's favorite. So there's that aspect of it. But my sister would say every time I would come home from points unknown, my sister would say, "Oh, yeah, every time you come home, the world stops because the Julie is home." And it was just like, and I'm like, really? Because it never feels that way. I don't feel like it's, oh, really? You're here. Okay. And they go about their business. It's not a big fanfare. There's never like a party or anything, or there's not like banners on
You
the
don't have
doorway.
the fatted calf, Julie.
No, not slaughtered, not for me. But she's like, oh, it's all she talks about until you're here. And it's all she talks about the next week after you're gone. And I'm like, oh, I've never known that.
But would
But
it
yeah.
kill them to be nice? I don't
Well,
get
they're nice. They're nice. They are nice. There's just, you can just see how some of the negative belief kicks in. Yeah.
why not? Yeah, sorry, we're not bitching about them, we're talking about ourselves. Because
Yeah.
it wouldn't be beyond them to go, gosh, we're really excited about you coming home. It's lovely to have you here. You know?
Oh, they say that in the initial minutes and then, yeah. And that's, yeah. But it's just interesting how, yeah, they
Yes,
talk
and
about
of course,
the other to the other. Yeah.
yes, and also we, of course, are looking through our lenses. But yes, so not good enough for me is huge, and up until now, that's probably been that. I think that's at the root of all my stressy overwork, like the whole thing about the shed, which let's not go into that.
Oh,
I think all
yeah.
that's about fear of getting a bad review, somebody not liking it, something. That's why I just, it's too much pressure. And I didn't think I was like that, like not with us, it's like I didn't think,
Yeah.
I'm not a house proud. I don't, you can tell from the way I dress, like it's not like I put a lot of effort into things like that. And yeah, I suppose, but for me, not good enough is more about running a really efficient household. Like very early on, I would start buying things in bulk because it was cheaper, because I was on a budget. I've always had a really efficient way of saving money. I always have spreadsheets that make sure we're on the best mortgage deal. And so that was how it came out for me. And at some point, somebody might have pointed out to me that that wasn't normal. And then I began to feel proud of that. And then of course that exacerbates it, because that's how good I am, Julie, is how much control I have over these things. And until you meet other people who do things differently, I just thought everyone was like that. But I was quite proud of the fact that I had lists of fucking everything, even Christmas cards. Mind you, that was just because I didn't want to send Christmas cards, so I only ever sent Christmas cards to people that sent me a card, and if they didn't send me one, they were off the list for next year, because I was trying to escape the whole Christmas card trap. But I was ruthlessly efficient with
Yes. Yeah, I was too. Yeah, Christmas is a good example. I would go overboard on buying presents. I would make sure everybody had Christmas cards. I would be so exhausted by the time it got to be Christmas. Usually I would be sick. That's how exhausted I was. Now I don't do Christmas cards, and I'm trying to not. I don't presents, or like, I'm like, does anybody want a book? Like, that's my thing.
I'll
Although
write
much to the chagrin of many people around me, huh?
start writing your book and you say, I've got a book here, so I'll sign it for you if you like.
Exactly. That'll be totally, in a couple years, that'll be it. Don't you want this signed and autographed? Yeah.
Just so you know, Julie's written, because I was looking at your email and I thought, no, it requires some thought on my part. But in Julie's latest, what would you call it, email, she's asked for ideas about what she should write about. So everybody who gets Julie's email, if you don't sign up and get it, it's very good. And we can dictate history here by deciding what Julie's. I'm toying towards a car. I think it was the middle one, but anyway, that's another discussion.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, Julie, because Lucas is fascinating, but it was one about more generically about how animals. I think it was the one in the middle. How animals
Make us whole.
Yes,
Was the one in the middle, and then animal communication is a spiritual path as the third.
you see, that's quite intriguing as well. So the first one's about Lucas's and your journey together.
Yes.
Which I love, but obviously I know that animals make us whole tickled me in a sense. I thought, interesting actually. And like this is what's so fascinating about this work, although I hate people that say this work, is as soon as you put that out there, like as soon as you start exploring that, I just see this tree with all this fruit completely like overladen with fruit. There's just so much there, and once you start down that path, you know, it's just going to be a jungle of stuff to populate the book with, shall we say. I'm talking
Yeah.
shop, but
Yeah. It's interesting. So I'm part of this writers community for Hay House, and going through this, they were kind of walking you through step by step. It's kind of like how when we did animal communication, can you hear that lawn stuff?
I heard something, it sounded like an animal. That's fine, it's not.
No, it's lawn stuff. Anyway, this they're just like how we learned animal communication step by step. They're writing you through walking you through the writing process. And I got to the part of like, okay, you've done all this work. Now put it out there so that you can have people are like, now there's accountability. But one of the ways to do that is to get input on what to write about first. And I'm like, oh, so that's what that is. That's me doing that.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
curious to see where it's going.
you've got me to answer to now, Julie, so you have to do it.
I know, and that scares the crap. No, just teasing.
But that's also, you see, again, not everybody would respond to that, but you're not good enough. You know, oh my God, people have actually written in and told me what I have to. Well, I have to write it now. Otherwise,
Yes.
I've let people down, and you know, good girls don't do that. This thing, do you know what? Good is one of those words that I think should be struck from the English language completely. We were actually, this was in it was actually in Danielle's community for sensitive people, and it was some chat about something. It was one, she does a webinar once a month where we talk about random subjects and stuff like that, and there was some woman there that was very quietly spoken, very well spoken and demure and that, and she just said, was it, I've paid enough in therapy not to be the good girl anymore. And I thought that's just brilliant. It was so brilliant because it's true, isn't it? It's like Gary always says, I don't understand why you want to be good. And I'm like, you know, like, what's all this about? Because he thinks this is all about self-improvement. I'm like, it's not about good, it's about happy. And if anything has made me miserable in my life, it's trying to be good. Because although I was very rebellious as a child, very rebellious, which is why this acknowledgement that underneath it all, I'm just this little child trying to be good, it came as such a shock to me, because I've always been extremely rebellious, very outspoken, very opinionated, didn't kowtow to anybody. I was always in trouble. I wasn't never like really serious trouble. Like I haven't been expelled or anything like that, but I was regularly in the headmistress's office, or I've never been suspended either. You know, there's a line that perhaps I wouldn't cross, and also I don't think there's ever been any malice in anything I did. I just didn't like being pushed around. I didn't like unfairness or unjustness, and I would speak out, and teachers don't always appreciate that, I found, but I wouldn't back down. If I knew I was right, I wouldn't back down, and before you'd know it, I'd be standing going, what the fuck happened? It would have been escalated, and suddenly I'm, you know, outside the headmaster's office. Don't think I ever got whipped. Did I get whipped?
Oh geez.
Oh yeah.
Oof.
I don't think I did. I think girls got the tacky, which is a like a plimsoll. Boys got whipped and girls got hit with a shoe.
Oh.
I don't think I ever did.
Oh.
I mean, my mom hit us. That wasn't.
Oh. Yeah, I would get spanked. I got slapped when I was in my early 20s, late teens. Yeah. Yeah. Good times.
My mom would say, "Come in here and pull your pants down."
Oof.
So a little bit of humiliation in there as well. I remember
Exactly.
parents like that. She's like, your mother's shaming you, and you're like, I thought she was just mean, but okay. But horrible things. Sorry, I'm being very down on my mother. I get to. She was really horrible to me today. Not spiritual. I'm sorry. Unconditional love, my arse, right? As soon as she pushes my buttons, we're all human after all. Is there such a thing? It's like I'll still be a good girl, and I'll still get you your incontinence pads, even if you don't deserve them, because you know, is it because I care, or is it because I'm a good girl? Well, maybe it's a bit of both, but I'm not going to like you very much. So there. But
you know, there was
still going to be a good girl.
Yeah, there was something else too, that there's an inverse, and I think we're going to talk about that next month, is there's an inverse to overwork. And I know next month we're going to talk about, I believe we're talking about procrastination as a workaround.
Yes.
Yeah. However, something that was kicking in for me this week as I was thinking about not good enough, there is also, which to some degree is procrastination, but I'm going to highlight it just is also shutting down or not actually engaging at all. So if there's, so like, cause I was realizing that part of also like the blog post that I did with what book should I write first, for me to feel good enough, that was a huge push, because usually to feel good enough, I would actually not share that. I would actually go all the way over here and then I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to write the book in secret and then hope people find it. Like that would be the normal MO.
And why
Because
would that be, Julie? Because you don't want to be the girl that's all that, which was the expression that at least Loanne uses. And like I thought, I've never heard that expression, but I know immediately exactly what she means. That girl who is
Mhm.
all that. You think you're all that. Even the words just make me.
Well, even for me, just to put myself out there like that, where then I can get shamed, ridiculed, put down, judged, all the things, right? Not held up to the standard of whatever the good girl is, because what I'm doing would not be up to that standard, then, and so there was that aspect of it. And then I was also thinking, so that's next month, we'll be talking about procrastination in different forms and whatnot. But I was also, as you were telling different parts of your story, there was being reminded of what I studied in college. Wasn't like something. I mean, I studied, it was fun, but I didn't really get good grades in college because I wasn't as engaged as I was in other things in high school. So I just realized, I just saw like this whole like unfurling of all these different things that were leading up to me not feeling good enough, and how I would disengage or disassociate from what I was doing, because it wasn't really what I wanted to do, but I didn't need anybody to see or know that it wasn't what I wanted to do. I really wanted to do this. So like I studied all of this other stuff that didn't engage me at all. And I had way more fun being the music director at the college radio station. And I put my whole heart and soul into that. And then I didn't pursue that as a career because that wouldn't have been good enough.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Based on what? Like why was whatever you were doing over here? And if it was marketing, Julie, I can tell you straight away it wasn't good enough.
It actually wasn't. It was telecommunications, which I had no interest in whatsoever.
That's where I ended up, was telecommunications. So, but why would being a music director in your mind be less worthy, for want of a better word, than
less pay?
See, I
less
ended
pay with artists and stuff like that. Huh?
I ended up in computing and telecoms just because a comment my mum made about, oh, well, you'll always get a job if you do computing. I was a mature student now, having done fuck all and bummed around when I was younger. I did eventually go to university and do computer science, but I ended up in telecoms. But it's interesting, isn't it? It's all about the money. Because did your parents explicitly tell you that? How did you pick up on that?
I remember I have an uncle that jumped around majors. He was in college. He was like the last child of my grandmother's 8. And so he jumped around majors a ton, to the point where I just remember family members saying, oh, Uncle so-and-so has changed his major again. Uncle so-and-so has changed his major again. He went from like oceanography, biology, political science. And I remember when he chose political science for his hot second, my family, extended family, going, you can't do anything with a political science degree. So political science, literature, English, any of the things that political science wasn't one on my radar, but English and literature would have been, you can't do anything with those. You can't get a job in those. You can't, what are you going to do with that? Because I didn't want to be a teacher. You want to be a teacher? No, then you can't do anything with that. You have to do something that gets you a degree. Actually, and the other thing I really wanted to do was learn a bunch of languages and work for the UN and be a translator, because I have an aunt that actually did that for a while. I really wanted to do that. It wasn't necessarily encouraged. And I'm not blaming anybody. It also didn't help that once I got to Japanese, because I studied Japanese for a while, none of the teaching assistants could speak English. So no one could help me understand what they were teaching me in English. They taught it all in Japanese. And I'm like, I don't understand anything you're saying. And I couldn't make the leap without having that little English bridge for a little bit in an effort to understand what they were saying. So sorry, there goes the lawnmower again. So
That
anyway.
sounded like actually a woman's voice going, whoa. The angels again. That's how they teach languages, though, that you don't get a translator. Where did you learn Japanese?
At university, but usually the 100 level, you still have a little bit of help in English, as to, especially when you're explaining the grammar as to why. And when you're explaining the mechanics of the language, you usually hear that in your native tongue or the tongue in which you're being normally taught, and not in Japanese. It was all in Japanese, and I'm like, I have no idea what y'all are talking about. So I ended up stopping and then switching careers. Although I still went on and studied other languages, which I love languages. I think all that is fun, but that's not something. That's the other thing, is education is very much siloed and very much at least here, very much path driven.
It is.
And to have that broader expanse to me is far more interesting, but that's just not how we are. That's how we learn.
Like your uncle had the right idea, because this is, we do all these subjects. They are subjects. They're not really things that are going to translate into a job at the end of the day. And then suddenly you hit like 17, 18 and you're expected to make a decision for the rest of your life about what you can do. It's like, how would you know?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, look, I switched careers. Yeah. At 50, I switched careers. Totally. I prepared for it in the 40s, and then, yeah. And I think that's part of it. I don't regret anything that I did. I may have wanted to decide to learn a little bit more about some other things, but I think at some point it all came back around. It's still coming back around, because I don't know all the things I want to know. Yeah.
I still don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Who knows?
Okay. Yeah. Who did I hear? I was listening to somebody one of our colleagues, Paula Hooper. We can put her contact information. Paula Hooper, she started learning animal communication in her mid to late 60s, and she's in her 70s now doing as a CPP. Yeah, she doesn't look it, does she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well done, Paula.
Yeah, she did that. She said that the other night when we had an animal communication collective, also in the show notes, event. She mentioned that she's like, and I'm proof that you can learn anything at any time and do anything at any time. It doesn't matter. Age does not matter. And I'm like, bravo, Paula. So yeah. Anyway, I think we're at a good spot to end this week, don't you think?
Okay. Yes.
Yes. Okay. You still want to talk about your mom?
No, never heard of her.
Okay. Okay, cool. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this week's episode of Making Light Two Humans Being. One of the humans is myself, Julie, here to the other, I can't even say my name. The other human here, as always, is Kate Foggo. We will see you next week when we discuss the fourth negative belief as it relates to workaround, and that will be not feeling safe, secure, and protected. So if you have questions or thoughts beforehand, please leave them in the comments below, and we'll make sure to address them next week. Other than that, please let us know how workaround helps you get through your negative belief of not good enough, and maybe you're being aware of it and how it's unraveling for you. Let us know. We'd love to hear your experiences. Please hit the subscribe button. We're almost to 100 subscribers. So the more of you who can hit subscribe helps us get there. And the more we can get there, the more other people can find us. And also hit that little bell so that you're reminded when there's new episodes, which are usually every Friday. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We hope to see you here next week on Making Light Two Humans Being. Until then, take really good care of yourself.